I'm doing my presentation on a recent evolutionary study that was just done on prehistoric dogs and the traces of their diversity previously to the Ice Age. So the two articles that I used, I first went on Science Daily, and I found this interesting one that pointed out that ancient dog DNAs have been traced back, and there were actually multiple species of dogs back then, and the dogs that we see, most of the dogs that we see today, especially in Europe, are actually from one species of dog. And so it's interesting that now we have, a little bit more of an extended phylogeny tree that we can create. And then the second one was the peer-reviewed article that was associated with the Science Daily article, and it gave me more data on the study itself and how they came to this conclusion. Rather, the media article actually just gave me information about what the scientists who worked on the research kind of thought and what their conclusions were. So basically, this is a summary of the research from both the media article and from the research article. So basically it says here that the DNA evidence that was revealed were from many different types of dog, and that from 11,000 years ago, which is actually right after the Ice Age. Previously, wolves were believed to be the first animals to have, that mutualistic relationship with humans, and then they kind of eventually got domesticated and became dogs. But we actually don't know a lot about the history of dogs once they've become dogs and how they were even linked to humans. The research showed that a lot of times the dogs would follow with the humans and migrate with them. But there were some cases where the dog populations did not migrate with the humans. So the study was basically done on ancient dog genomes that were 10.9 thousand years old from Europe, near the east, and Serbia. And the study mostly focused on European dogs. So there were actually three common populations of dogs, and there's actually only one single dog that most of the population that we see from modern European dogs are from. So that was very interesting. And then the study went on to even kind of evaluate how the humans and their populations migrated with the dogs, and how that was associated with their domestication. So, yes. So basically, the general hypothesis was that was kind of addressed was that there is a link between the history of dogs and humans and their changes in their relationships as a result of many factors, and that these dogs were moving in between human groups and what that effect was on them. And there were many key findings in this research, one being that at least 5 major ancestral dog sequences were actually diversified in 11,000 years ago. So basically, there were set populations that were spread out, and over the years they kind of formed into, or not formed, but bred into, some of the modern dogs that we actually see now today. And we were trying to find basically what that link was and how they came from these older different types of dogs into the dogs that we see today. So originally there were actually 2 distinct dog populations, and now there's kind of just one general dog population. And we saw, there's a lot of, even though all dogs come in a lot of shapes and sizes, the general diversity of the dogs that we see today are not as high as the diversity that were seen in these ancient European dog populations. So our general methods to kind of conduct this study: basically, the researchers sequenced 27 ancient dog genomes that, took up over 10.9 thousand years old from Europe, the Near East, and Serbia. And they did this technology that was called a PCA to kind of reconcile all of the statistics of where the dogs are from and what their gene flow were and how the dogs came from the wolf populations and how they how the dog populations followed the human populations and what the statistics and if it was significant or not. So to do the association with the human population, they took 17 sets of the human genome-wide data, and then they matched the age and the location to the dogs so that they could have a better understanding of what their influence was. And then basically at the end, the scientists actually plotted the ancient dogs against how old they were, where they were, against sorry, I'm very sick. Sorry, they plotted actually the dogs against the age where they're from, against several genes that were being flowed and seen into the different dogs. So this basically, the findings between the media coverage and what was done in the experiment. So the media coverage, as I was saying in the beginning, it did actually cover what the peer-reviewed article said. It did a really great job of summarizing the general results of the study, but it didn't go into a lot of the methods of how they got it. However, it did actually have a lot of quotes from the scientists who actually wrote the research paper and worked on the research that the article did not include, which was great and an insight to kind of see what they resulted in and everything. And Ron, an actual article of the research, actually pointed out that it's important for us to know about the ancient DNA of dogs and other domesticated animals because it'll help us know more about our animal companions and kind of add to our understanding of human history, and not only add to the phylogeny tree of dogs, but actually understand how humans came to be and how their populations understand how their populations migrated and everything like that. So basically, this is showing you all kind of where the different dogs have come from and where we see certain types and kind of their ancestral sources, which I thought was really interesting because there are so many dogs and they look so diverse, but they are not actually. So I originally thought dogs were the ancestors of wolves, and I didn't really think anything of more than that. I was like, oh yeah, dogs came from wolves, and that was the end. But the steps that actually have come to get to modern dogs is very in depth, and I had no idea of that. Everything now is especially genetic diverse, and reading this article definitely made me think about the evolutionary changes that have happened over thousands of years that we now have in several of the dogs that we see today. If you have any questions, please comment on my post. I'd be happy to answer a lot of them. If any of my presentation was confusing, always ask me questions, but thank you so much for listening.